Happy Thursday, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Market Update, where we discuss leading financial and economic developments in Europe, Asia, and North America. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. And first up, we begin in Asia. US President Donald Trump has sharply escalated trade tensions with India, announcing an additional 25% tariff on Indian imports due to New Delhi's continued purchase of Russian oil. The move, formalized in an executive order released yesterday, Wednesday, adds to a prior 25% tariff unveiled last week, bringing the total duties on Indian goods to 50% starting this month. The announcement came just hours after Steve Witkoff, a senior US envoy, met with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow. In the executive order, the White House justified the levies by linking India's Russian oil purchases to efforts to undercut sanctions aimed at Moscow over the war in Ukraine. Trump said the move was part of a broader strategy to pressure nations still engaging with the Kremlin. Quote, "They don't care how many people in Ukraine are being killed by the Russian war machine," end quote, Trump posted on social media. His Ministry of External Affairs strongly condemned the decision, calling the tariffs, quote, "unfair, unjustified, and unreasonable," end quote. The ministry reiterated that oil imports are based on, quote, "market factors," end quote, and serve the energy security of the country's 1.4 billion people. Officials in New Delhi signaled that they have no intention of halting Russian oil imports, which account for roughly 2 million of the 5 million barrels India consumes daily. So these are significant purchases from Russia's point of view. Analysts say Indian Prime Minister Modi faces both geopolitical and practical challenges in adjusting the country's energy mix. Quote, "New Delhi could pivot more towards non-Russian barrels," end quote, said Sumit Ritolia, lead analyst at Kepler, adding, quote, "But I don't think we'll see a day when India stops buying Russian oil," end quote. The White House also instructed administration officials to review energy trade by other countries and assess whether additional tariffs should be applied, potentially implicating other major importers of Russian crude, such as Turkey and, critically, China. Back in India, Trump's trade actions are already rippling through the economy. The Reserve Bank of India held its benchmark interest rate at 5.5% on Wednesday, citing uncertainty stemming from the US tariffs. The Reserve Bank of India governor warned that the, quote, "impact of the 100 basis point rate cut since February 2025 is still unfolding," end quote, adding that geopolitical and financial volatility remains a threat to growth. Despite the pressure, India's central bank maintained its 6.5% GDP growth forecast for the fiscal year. Yet with trade ties with the US deteriorating, some experts believe India may now pivot more firmly toward strategic partnerships with Russia, China, and other non-Western powers. Whether Trump's tariff threats succeed in isolating Moscow or merely drive America's partners closer to it remains an open question. But at the very least, the US market is much more attractive than the Russian or even the Chinese markets. And India knows this. Next up, and speaking of trade policy, President Donald Trump also announced a sweeping 100% tariff on semiconductor imports, part of a broader trade strategy aimed at bringing high-technology manufacturing back to US soil. The announcement came alongside Apple CEO Tim Cook in the Oval Office this week, where the two revealed a new $100 billion investment plan focused on expanding Apple's domestic operations. Quote, "We're going to be putting a very large tariff on chips and semiconductors," end quote, the US president told reporters, adding, quote, "But if you are building in the United States or have committed to build in the United States, there will be no charge," end quote. Trump clarified that companies in the process of building US manufacturing capacity would also be exempt, even if production has not yet begun. The exemption provides a significant reprieve for Apple, which had long relied on a complex Asia-centric supply chain. Apple's investment includes a major expansion of its American manufacturing program involving long-time suppliers like Corning Inc., Texas Instruments, and Applied Materials. Corning, for example, will dedicate an entire Kentucky facility to Apple's glass production, boosting employment in the state by 50%. The announcement adds to Apple's previously pledged $500 billion in US spending through 2029, raising that total now to $600 billion. Trump has so far spared consumer electronics like smartphones and laptops from his reciprocal tariffs, but warned that these categories may soon face separate levies tied to semiconductor content. Such tariffs would hit major Apple products, most of which are assembled in India and Vietnam, both now subject to new tariffs of 50% for India and 20% For Vietnam, the tariff policy's impact will hinge on its implementation. Many top semiconductor firms such as TSMC, Samsung, Micron, and Intel already operate or plan to build US fabs. However, major designers like Nvidia and AMD depend on overseas foundries, particularly in Taiwan and South Korea, and may struggle to meet exemption criteria. Cook's appearance with Trump marks a continuation of Apple's quiet diplomacy with the administration. Though iPhone assembly remains overseas, Cook emphasized the increasing number of components now sourced from the United States. Trump's rhetoric reflects an escalating effort to tie foreign manufacturing decisions to U.S. economic goals. While many companies had already been expanding U.S. capacity, Trump's strategy raises the stakes and the costs for those which haven't. If you want to be on top of the most up-to-date analysis on the biggest developments in the most important markets around the world, consider subscribing to Market Update, hit the bell notification icon, and you will be. And if you're getting some value from today's episode of Market Update, it's a big help if you can hit that like button and share with someone who you think will also get that value. And finally for today, we move to Europe. Italy's government has approved the long-delayed construction of a €13.5 billion bridge linking Sicily to the mainland, rebranding the massive infrastructure project as crucial to national defence and NATO commitments. The 3.3-kilometre, approximately 2-mile suspension bridge across the Messina Strait has been proposed and shelved many times over the past century. Originally envisioned as a catalyst for economic development in one of Italy's poorest regions, it is now being touted by Prime Minister Meloni's administration as a strategic military asset in a more volatile Mediterranean. Quote, "This is a work that has no precedent in the world," end quote, said Deputy Prime Minister Salvini following cabinet approval on yesterday, adding, quote, "I'm absolutely proud of the work we've done so far," end quote. Italy, like most NATO members, has pledged to increase defence spending to 5% of GDP by 2035, with 1.5% earmarked for strategic infrastructure. The Meloni government now aims to classify the Messina Bridge as part of that effort, arguing that it will enhance military mobility given the presence of key NATO bases in southern Italy. An April government report described the bridge as essential to, quote, "defend the security," end quote, enabling the rapid movement of Italian and allied forces. Quote, "The growing role of the Mediterranean as a geopolitically sensitive area," end quote, justifies the investment, it said. However, critics have questioned the strategic logic. Alessandro Morone, a defense expert at Rome's Institute for International Affairs, said linking Sicily to the mainland does little to aid NATO's central concern, the rapid redeployment of forces to Eastern Europe in case of Russian aggression. Quote, "If you have to go east, it's either via the Adriatic, via plane, or via the Alps," end quote, he told UK-based The Financial Times. The idea of bridging the Messina Strait dates back to antiquity. In 252 BC, Roman historian Pliny the Elder recounted how war elephants were transported across the strait on rafts of tied barrels. The dream of a physical connection gained renewed attention with Italy's unification in the 19th century and became a national priority in the 1970s. Despite multiple attempts, including a €3.9 billion contract issued in 2005 under Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi, the project has repeatedly stalled due to fiscal constraints and structural concerns. Local opposition in Messina remains strong too, with residents objecting to massive urban changes, including the relocation of the train station and demolition of neighborhoods. Construction is set to begin in the autumn, with expropriations and groundwork planned for September or October. Costs have surged from €4.4 billion in early projections to €13.5 billion today. While Meloni argues the bridge is vital amid, quote, "hybrid threats," end quote, and Russian influence in North Africa, some warn it could itself become a liability. Military planners note its high vulnerability to attack and the potential need for dedicated air and sea defences. Still, for the government at least, the symbolic and strategic weight of the project, evidently, is worth the price. Okay, that is today's episode of Market Update. Thank you everybody for watching. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good Thursday. Enjoy the rest of your week. There will not be an episode tomorrow, but there will be this week's final episode of Market Update on Saturday.